Wyoming. Wyoming has fewer people than most city neighborhoods, but somehow gets 2 senators. This entire state has 576,000 residents, less than Milwaukee, spread across an area bigger than the UK. The numbers are staggering. At 2.3 people per square mile, Wyoming maintains the smallest population of any state since 1890. You're more likely to see an antelope than your neighbor. The state contains vast stretches where the nearest gas station is 100 miles away, and the nearest Starbucks might as well be on Mars. Yellowstone National Park alone receives more annual visitors than Wyoming has permanent residents. This emptiness creates absurd political mathematics. Wyoming's 576,000 people wield the same Senate power as California's 39 million. Each Wyoming voter has 68 times more influence in the Senate than a Californian. Infrastructure costs run around $5,000 per resident annually because building roads and utilities for 3 people, scattered across 100 square miles, makes about as much economic sense as opening a subway system on the moon. Federal highway funding keeps the state connected to civilization, while property taxes remain artificially low because there's literally nobody around to pay them. Alaska. Alaska is so empty that bears outnumber Republicans in most districts. The state is twice the size of Texas, but has fewer people than San Francisco's Mission District. The scale defies comprehension. Alaska spans 665,000 square miles with just 733,000 residents, roughly 1 person per square mile. Most communities are accessible only by plane or boat, creating isolated pockets of civilization scattered across a landmass larger than most countries. Anchorage contains 40% of the state's entire population, while the rest live in towns that make frontier settlements look cosmopolitan. This isolation costs taxpayers dearly. Alaska requires $3 billion annually in federal subsidies just to maintain basic services. Mail delivery to remote villages costs $50 per letter because pilots risk their lives flying supplies through mountain passes and Arctic storms. Internet infrastructure reaches some areas at dial-up speeds that would embarrass 1995. The state pays residents an annual dividend from oil revenues, essentially bribing people to stay in a place where winter lasts 8 months, and summer consists of mosquitoes the size of small aircraft. Building a single mile of road can cost $2 million when materials must be flown in during the brief construction season. North Dakota. North Dakota's biggest export isn't oil. It's young people fleeing to literally anywhere else. The state gained population during the oil boom, then lost it faster than a Ponzi scheme collapse. The Bakken oil rush temporarily masked North Dakota's fundamental emptiness problem. Population peaked at 779,000 in 2017 as workers flocked to fracking fields. But the boom created a mirage of prosperity. When oil prices crashed, so did the population. Since 2010, 60% of counties have been steadily losing residents, leaving behind ghost towns with brand new infrastructure nobody uses. The economic whiplash devastated rural communities. Towns like Williston built hotels, restaurants, and housing for oil workers who disappeared when drilling slowed. Empty man camps now dot the landscape like monuments to boom-bust economics. Young graduates leave for Minneapolis, Denver, or anywhere with career opportunities beyond agriculture and energy extraction. This state spends millions recruiting workers, while existing residents flee harsh winters and limited cultural amenities. Rural hospitals close because there aren't enough patients to justify keeping doors open. School districts consolidate or shut down entirely, forcing children to bus 90 minutes each way to reach the nearest classroom. South Dakota. South Dakota has more monuments than people per square mile. Mount Rushmore gets more annual visitors than the state has permanent residents. The state contains 887,000 people spread across 77,000 square miles, creating a population density that makes frontier settlements look crowded. Mount Rushmore attracts 2.3 million tourists annually, more than double the state's population, who spend a weekend gawking at carved presidential faces before returning to places with actual economies. Meanwhile, 46 of 66 counties are actively shrinking as residents abandon small towns for Sioux Falls or migrate out of state entirely. This exodus creates cascading infrastructure collapse. Rural hospitals close because patient volumes can't support basic emergency services, forcing residents to drive 150 miles for medical care. School districts consolidate or shut down completely, leaving children on 2-hour bus rides to reach the nearest classroom. Main streets become museums of failed businesses. empty storefronts that once housed banks, pharmacies, and cafes. The state markets itself as a tax haven for millionaires, while actual South Dakotans work multiple jobs to afford housing in the few remaining viable communities. Tourism revenues flow to national chains, while local economies wither like corn in a drought. Delaware. Delaware exists solely so credit card companies have somewhere to hide from regulations. The entire state is smaller than most counties, but somehow has its own senators. Despite cramming 990,000 people into just 2,000 square miles, Delaware feels empty because it's essentially one giant suburb punctuated by strip malls and corporate headquarters. The state has no major cities, no natural landmarks, and no cultural identity beyond being America's premier corporate tax shelter. Most residents live in subdivisions that blur together like a real estate developer's fever dream. This corporate plantation economy creates bizarre distortions. Over 60% of Fortune 500 companies incorporate in Delaware to exploit its business-friendly laws, generating billions in revenue from phantom headquarters that consist of mailboxes and filing cabinets. Meanwhile, actual Delawareans pay some of the nation's highest property taxes to fund services for a state that exists primarily on paper. The entire northern third blends seamlessly into Philadelphia's sprawl, while southern counties remain agricultural wastelands dotted with chicken farms. Delaware proves that you can technically be a state while contributing absolutely nothing to American culture beyond creative accounting and toll booth revenue on I-95. Montana. Montana is so big and empty that Netflix delivery takes 3 business days by horseback. Big Sky Country has more cattle than humans, and the cattle are probably better at directions. The state stretches across 147,000 square miles with just 1.08 million people, creating a population density lower than most developing countries. Outside Billings and Missoula, Montana consists of ranches separated by distances that would qualify as counties in other states. Some properties are larger than Rhode Island, with nearest neighbors living 50 miles away across terrain that GPS systems have given up trying to map accurately. This vastness creates infrastructure nightmares that would bankrupt smaller nations. Internet coverage costs $100 million annually to deliver speeds worse than rural Romania. Cell towers serve areas the size of Connecticut with 12 subscribers, making each phone call cost roughly $500 in infrastructure investment. Mail delivery requires postal workers to drive circuits that span multiple time zones, while emergency services operate from bases that might be 3 hours away during good weather. The State Highway Department maintains roads longer than the entire interstate system just to connect towns with populations smaller than high school graduating classes. Winter storms routinely cut off communities for weeks at a time. Maine. Maine has more lighthouses than McDonald's because apparently guiding lost ships is more profitable than Big Macs. The state is mostly forest, with occasional humans scattered like Easter eggs. Maine contains 1.39 million people, but 90% live within 20 miles of the coast, leaving the interior as empty as a Stephen King novel's moral landscape. The state is 90% forest, creating vast wilderness areas where the largest settlements consist of a gas station, a diner, and 3 people arguing about lobster prices. Counties like Aroostook are larger than Connecticut, but contain fewer residents than a suburban shopping mall. This geographic isolation creates service deserts that make frontier life look convenient. Entire counties lack cell phone coverage, forcing residents to communicate through smoke signals or particularly loud shouting. Internet arrives via satellite connections that cost $200 monthly for speeds that make dial-up look fast. Emergency services operate from bases 100 miles away, making heart attacks a scheduling challenge. The state's economy depends on seasonal tourism and lobster fishing, creating boom-bust cycles that leave locals working multiple jobs to afford heating oil during 9-month winters. Rural hospitals close faster than Stephen King can write new horror stories. New Hampshire. Live free or die, but mostly just die of boredom in the middle of nowhere. The state's biggest city has fewer people than a mid-sized shopping mall food court. New Hampshire contains 1.38 million residents, but outside the Manchester-Nashua corridor, it's basically Canada with worse healthcare. Manchester, the state's largest city, has just 115,000 people, smaller than most college towns. The rest of the state consists of small towns connected by winding roads that GPS systems treat as theoretical suggestions rather than actual routes. This emptiness creates a tax structure that defies economic logic. New Hampshire has no income tax or sales tax, forcing residents to fund everything through property taxes that would make Beverly Hills homeowners weep. Towns with 500 residents somehow maintain school systems, fire departments, and road crews using revenue from properties that half the residents can't afford. The state motto celebrates freedom, while residents work multiple jobs to pay taxes higher than most countries. Rural areas lose population steadily as young people flee for Massachusetts jobs and return only for cheap liquor runs. Economic development consists of hoping Massachusetts spillover reaches far enough north to matter, while most of the state remains beautiful, empty, and financially unsustainable. Hawaii. Paradise is empty because nobody can afford a $12 gallon of milk and $2 million starter homes. Aloha means hello, goodbye, and also, please send financial assistance. Hawaii contains 1.44 million residents fleeing to the mainland faster than lava flows. The state's isolation creates a cost of living that makes Manhattan look affordable. Basic groceries cost triple mainland prices because everything except pineapples must be shipped 2,500 miles across the Pacific. A gallon of milk costs $12, while median home prices exceed $800,000 for properties that would sell for $150,000 in Ohio. This economic reality forces mass exodus of locals. Native Hawaiian families, priced out by tourism development, relocate to Las Vegas and California in search of housing they can actually afford. Young professionals leave for college and never return, creating a brain drain that leaves the islands dependent on imported labor and management. The tourism economy pays service wages while demanding Manhattan rent, forcing locals to work 3 jobs just to afford studio apartments. Rural communities lose population as sugar and pineapple plantations close, replaced by luxury resorts that employ mainland transplants. Hawaii proves that even paradise becomes hell when a 1-bedroom apartment costs more than most people's annual salary. West Virginia. Almost heaven, if heaven is coal dust and economic despair. The state loses population faster than it loses mountains to strip mining. West Virginia has plummeted from 2 million residents in 1950 to just 1.77 million today, making it the only state to consistently shrink for 7 decades. Young people leave for college and treat returning like a form of economic suicide. The state's brightest graduates flee to Virginia, North Carolina, or anywhere with job opportunities beyond mining, logging, or asking, "Would you like fries with that?" This exodus creates a demographic death spiral. Coal industry collapse eliminated 60% of mining jobs since 2010, leaving entire counties with unemployment rates exceeding 15%. The opioid crisis fills the void left by economic opportunity, with overdose rates triple the national average. Rural hospitals close monthly because patient volumes can't support basic services, forcing residents to drive hours for emergency care. School systems consolidate desperately as enrollment plummets, with some districts serving areas larger than Rhode Island. Main streets resemble post-apocalyptic movie sets, filled with empty storefronts and boarded windows. Federal transfer payments now comprise 30% of the state economy, essentially making West Virginia a ward of the federal government while politicians blame everyone except themselves for the collapse.